Today, in this episode, I am going to have a Dr. Matthew Zakreski. I don't know if I'm saying his name right. He's a clinical psychologist, keynote speaker, and a consultant who works with the gifted and neurodivergent communities. Now, when he come on, he will explain all that to you. But today on my podcast, he explained what he does. Um, I got him here to be on my podcast because, as you know, we have talked about NPDs. NPDs is Narcissistic Personality Disorder, and I came across him as a guest in the pod match, and they had him down as he talks about imposter syndrome. And I want him to explain to us and me what is the difference between imposter syndrome and a narcissist personality disorder. Welcome to the craziness that lives inside my head. What I want to talk about today, of course, when we start, you can explain how you say your name?
So everybody calls me Dr. Matt, but my last name is Zakreski.
Oh, okay. So, reason why I got you on the show today is because I was, there's a lot of, how you say, in America, we have all these names that we put on personalities, names for this, names for that.
Mhm.
And I read about what you had imposter syndrome.
Yep.
And what caught my attention is I was dating a guy
Yeah.
who I felt bad for him because it looked like he's one of those people who try to achieve but never felt like he was good enough.
Yeah.
Okay. But yada yada yada. I wound up breaking up. And then when I broke up with him, another friend of mine, like explained what went on, was saying that the person I was dating was a narcissist.
Mhm.
He had narcissistic personality
Yeah.
syndrome. Yeah, disorder. So I'm wondering, so what is the difference? I mean, between someone who doesn't feel like they're good enough, but yet they go around and do certain things.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, and I love that you asked this question. It's an important question because when the terms that people in my profession use make their way out into popular culture, sometimes they get misused and misunderstood. And so it's like, yeah, let me help sort of speak to that a little bit, right? And you know, sort of clarify some points. I think it's a great idea.
Okay. So you can start
Okay.
explain to us, your credentials and everything.
So my name is Dr. Matt Zakreski. I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm a specialist in neurodivergence or people with different brains. So I do a lot of my work around supporting people with ADHD, autism, kids, people who are gifted, people who have dyslexia, that sort of thing. Um, and a lot of neurodivergent people suffer from imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is a condition where you doubt your worth and your accomplishments, and you have this persistent internalized fear of being discovered as a fraud and be, oh my gosh, I'm the first person in my family to go to college.
Mm,
It could be explicit, like I'm the only person in the orchestra who's in a wheelchair,
right.
right? When you're made aware of those differences, that can sort of be the soil that this fear of like I'm only here for this reason, right?
Mm,
And it can become very toxic and draining because that anxiety becomes insidious. You know, all your good accomplishments, like it doesn't matter because I'm only here because I'm the token minority hire, or I'm only here because all the good people left, right? And and unless we bring it out there and make it known, it becomes this thing where we suffer in silence. You know, I can't, when I give my talks on imposter syndrome, it's amazing to me how often people start crying because they didn't know that there was a name for this feeling, and they didn't know that it was something that can be worked with and treated.
Mm.
So it's a powerful moment for me as a speaker and as a therapist, because it's like, hey, you're not crazy. There's a word for this, I promise you. And a lot of people have spoken really eloquently about it. I mean, I can point people at Neil Gaiman or Oprah Winfrey, Maya Angelou, Emma Watson. I mean, Justice Sonia Sotomayor. Like, pick a famous person. A lot of them have spoken about imposter syndrome. And so there's this idea that we live in a society that amplifies confidence.
Mm.
People with imposter syndrome tend not to be very confident because they're terrified that someone is going to yank them out of their relationship or job or school or podcast or what it might be, right? I don't belong here, so I'm going to keep my head down.
Yeah.
Whereas the people who have the opposite of imposter syndrome, something called the Dunning-Kruger effect, um, they get amplified. The Dunning-Kruger effect is, I don't know a lot about this, but I sure think I know a lot about this, right? I was in a uh, I was in a meeting once, and I was trying to explain to a family who went to the school that I worked at as a mental health professional. I was like, so, your kid is struggling in these ways, and we think that the reason behind these things is this, XYZ reason. So I'm going to suggest we do this instead of what we've been doing. And the dad looked at me and he was like, listen, I'm not a psychologist and I don't know anything about education, but you're wrong. And I'm like, bro, you just like undercut your own argument, right? Like, I'm a psychologist who specializes in working with kids in schools. I absolutely know more about this than you do, sir, right? You're a day trading accountant and God bless you, right? You make the money, right? But yeah, I'll tell you, I'm right about this. But that's a Dunning-Kruger moment. Like, you know, people are like, it doesn't smell right, so it shouldn't be right. I mean, I'm sure you've seen, like, back in my day, we didn't have all this
Yeah.
autism and
Yeah.
ADHD.
Yeah.
Trust me, you did. We just didn't have names for it, right? If you track diagnostic trends over time, the term, before we use the term autism spectrum disorder, a lot of those kids were diagnosed with something called childhood schizophrenia, right? And it wasn't childhood schizophrenia. Schizophrenia can happen in children, but it's very rare. But if you go through the cluster of symptoms, they're talking about autism. So if you look at those rates of diagnosis to what they are now, autism just doesn't magically appear in the 70s. It's been here forever. We just named it as a different thing.
Well, I wasn't dying. Well, they didn't have a name for it, but I know they called my mother at school and told my mother that maybe I might see a psychiatrist. I was the I'm the child that sat in the back and talk all day long and
Yeah.
don't pay attention. Only because for me, I, I was bored. I mean, I was just bored. I mean, I found looking out the window was much more interesting than looking at the teacher.
And I can't tell you how many kids say that to me, right? And so, like, there's definitely some neurodivergence there. Like, it might be ADHD, it might be giftedness. I don't know you well enough to know, but it would be an interesting thing to explore, right? So, in that, that story amplifies this idea that the world is built for people with a very particular kind of brain. And if you don't have that kind of brain, you can find the world is not a great fit for you and may even be openly antagonistic to you.
Mm.
Right? So, like, I have kids with ADHD I work with who are brilliant learners and great students and good people, but because they can't sit still for a 45-minute chapter test, they fail. And
Yeah.
schools label them as not smart or defiant or unteachable, right? It's like, well, what this kid needs is the support to make their brain work for them. How do we do that? Like we tend to ask the wrong questions. Instead of focusing on why can't you do this, focus on what, when and how are you most successful, and how do we turn up the volume on that sort of thing?
Now, getting back to my friend, which
Yeah,
I have well, I know he was a narcissist because he always look in the mirror. He always want to make sure he doesn't have, because he's 70 some years old, don't have
yeah,
wrinkles constantly. And I should tell him that. I said, stop looking in the mirror and stop. And then there were times that he would do certain things. And I would ask him the question, did he have ADHD? D whatever.
yeah,
And he says to me, I don't think I have it. He said, but if they didn't have that term, that terminology when he was coming up.
yeah,
But my thing that's really interesting for me, I did feel sorry for him, but I felt there was something, now I hate to say mentally, something spiritually or whatever was wrong with him. But then what if do these people get devious in their mind and start using like like in his case, he had a lot, but
yeah,
he never felt that he was good enough. And I
yeah,
noticed that, never felt it good enough. But what he does is he take advantage of other people
yeah.
to get to make himself, well, to make himself look better, I guess. I mean, so what would you call that? Is that narcissism or is that um what you call it? Imposter syndrome.
Well, so it's definitely not imposter syndrome, because imposter syndrome would be more like looking at yourself in the mirror and be like, I can't go to this party or this event because once I get there, they're all going to know I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Right. I can't speak at this conference because once I walk in, they're like, haha, we know you're a false person. Get out of here. And you'd be like, finally they caught me. The narcissist says that I am better, I am special, and people should understand that and appreciate that. And if they don't, there's something wrong with them. Right. I'm the special one. Why are people not seeing how awesome I am?
Yeah.
Right. And sort of turn, like, it's very arrogant. And what it sort of boils down to is this sort of, it's a lack really of empathy. It's a lack of understanding that other people exist and other people have different opinions, right? If you and I decide to go out to dinner and I'm like, hey, do you want to try the Cuban restaurant in town? If you're a narcissist, you're gonna be like, he didn't ask me what I wanted to eat. Doesn't he know I'm the best restaurant person in town and my restaurant choices are better than your restaurant choices? And you're like, oh, sorry, something's come up, and you leave, right? That's more of a narcissistic move. The imposter syndrome person would say, like, why would you invite me out to dinner? I don't belong out this dinner. Only cool people go out to dinner. I'm not cool. I don't belong here. So, like, if the opposite of imposter syndrome is the Dunning-Kruger phenomenon, where you think you know a lot more than you do, versus imposter syndrome is like, I know a lot, but I don't think that it counts. Narcissistic personality disorder is much closer to Dunning-Kruger, where it's like the knowledge I have elevates me in some fantastic way, and it also denigrates the people around me who don't feel that way, right? So, and true narcissists can be very manipulative. They can patronize other people. They can be demanding, like, you know, do it my way or else. You know, um, they'll butter you up to get you on their team, and then turn around and kick you to the curb if you're not serving them anymore, right? I mean, that's not how imposter syndrome people tend to operate. And imposter syndrome people tend to be like working themselves into an anxious tizzy because they're so convinced if they're not the best and brightest, something awful is going to happen, right? The narcissist is like, I'm the best and brightest. I don't even have to show up. I didn't even have to put on pants today. I'm still the best and the brightest.
Yeah, but sometimes, because I noticed this with some people, even though like in my situation, I never believe anything he says
Hmm.
because he, as they say, as a narcissist, he built himself up so big that he knows this, he knows that. I
Yeah.
question everything. And I don't think he really knew everything. And I used to think he act as if he knows everything to cover up that he don't know anything. You
Yeah.
understand?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So that's how I took it with you know what he was doing, which means he's an imposter. He's just building himself up to cover up that he's an imposter.
Right. And it might be that might be the case. That might be sort of what we call in psychology an overcorrection, right? Like I'm worried that I'm not good enough, so I'm going to act like I'm really awesome.
Mm,
Right. So that would be sort of being an imposter, but not imposter syndrome as we understand it.
mm,
Um, and it's very common for for them to either not have an answer or get really defensive. Like, oh, you tell me you're a great chef. Well, you cook me something. Well, your kitchen is a mess. I couldn't work with these materials. Oh,
yeah.
well, I bought you good materials and fresh produce and cook me something. It's like, oh, what? You think I'm not good at this?
Mm-hmm.
Right? You realize like you're not actually answering the question. You are attacking me. You're working really hard not to do the thing. Whereas like think about the people in your life who love to cook or who are good cooks. You say, "Hey, I got a frying pan." Like, "Oh, cool, I'll make you something." Right? There's an intrinsic desire to do the thing, right? So, you know, because we live in a society where intelligent people tend to be filled with doubt and see all the, you know, permutations and shades of gray, they tend to say fewer things. Whereas anybody with a half-baked opinion can jump on Twitter and say, "You know what? I don't think the moon is real." And they just put that out there, right? That's the Dunning-Kruger effect. And the more those opinions and stances become a part of your personality, the more they can sort of metastasize into something like narcissistic personality disorder, where like I need to be venerated. I need to be, exalted because of my thoughts, opinions, and behaviors. There's something different and special about me that I shouldn't be judged on the scale as like you normal people, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So explain to us more about what you do. And is it did you write a book or anything?
Yeah, I'm working on a book.
Mm,
And in that all that spare time I have, because I'm a full-time psychologist, so I see 30 to 40 clients a week. I'm also a professional speaker, so I'm constantly flying places and giving talks for conferences and organizations and schools. And this time next week, I'll be in Pittsburgh, talking to an awesome group out there. So, um, people reach out to me because they want to know more about these things, and especially organizations that tend to employ a lot of intelligent, capable people. You see this a lot in the medical field. I don't mean to conflate confidence and narcissistic personality disorder. Confidence can be a good thing. Confidence is actually a great thing. But a truly confident person can take feedback and grow, right? So if you say to me, Dr. Matt, you're a great podcast host. Also, you talk a little bit too much. Rein it in, Chief. I'd be like, that's a great note. Thank you very much for telling me that because I want to be better at this.
mm,
If I'm a narcissist, I'm like, he's so lucky to have me on my podcast. And, I could just read text messages off my phone for 30 minutes and he'd be lucky to have me, right? There's no room in that worldview for feedback, constructive or otherwise. It's, I rock, you suck. You're lucky to be in my presence,
mm.
which is not how I feel about you, by the way, just to be clear.
Well, it was nice talking to you, and I'm gonna leave a it's gonna be on YouTube, so I'll leave a your what you call it your link.
Thank you.
So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the craziness that lives inside my head.